admissible, right?
I believe that's the correct language.
So what if you already have a visa, and then while in the U.S. with that visa, you espouse or support terrorist activity? Shouldn't that be an automatic cancellation of that visa?
Senator, I would have to check the law, but I would understand that it might be a basis for the revocation of the visa and the removal of the individual. I'd want to check the law in that area.
Well, I think it makes sense that if you can't get a visa because you espouse terrorist views or endorse terrorist views, if you have a visa and then you do that while a visitor, we're talking about visitors to the United States, that visa should be canceled.
I would agree.
Okay, good, because I'm asking the administration to enforce that, and I hope you will. I think that's important. Let me get, and there's a lot of talk about immigration. I deal with immigration every day because, as you know, where I live in Miami, virtually everyone's from somewhere else, whether it's another state or primarily another country in South Florida. So everywhere I go, I'm just going to get real about what people tell me. This is what they tell me. I talked to a lady 3 days ago. She says her son, I forgot the exact, he may be in Honduras. She's going to Venmo him $5,000, $6,000 or Cash App.
The current state of the U.S. immigration system is widely recognized as being deeply flawed and alarmingly exploitable. Across southern states like Texas, Arizona, and California, and all the way to immigrant-rich communities in places like Miami, a clear pattern has emerged that demonstrates how broken the immigration framework has become. In neighborhoods where nearly every family has a story tied to migration, people are openly discussing how the process works, not through legal representation or immigration offices, but by word of mouth, community WhatsApp groups, and even social media platforms. These are not speculations or theories. These are lived experiences, retold again and again, where migrants explain how easy it was to cross into the United States, claim a certain status, and begin building a life despite not following legal immigration channels. The pattern is remarkably simple and yet incredibly effective. A person from a country like Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, or Cuba decides to leave. They or a family member sends several $1,000s, often through services like Venmo or Cash App, to pay smugglers or guides known as coyotes. These individuals lead them to the U.S. Mexico border. Once at the border, the migrant presents themselves to a U.S. Border Patrol officer and expresses an intent to seek asylum or refugee status. Under the current rules and system backlog, many of these individuals are not detained long-term. Instead, they are processed, sometimes given a court date months or years in the future, and released into the U.S. interior with temporary permission to stay. Within 180 days, many can apply for work authorization, and from that point on, their life in the United States begins. No green card, no visa, no legal immigration application. Just a loophole that has been used by thousands, possibly tens of thousands. This system, as described by many lawmakers and even migrants themselves, incentivizes illegal entry because it works. And when something works, especially when the stakes are so high, people talk about it. Migrants tell others back home exactly what they did, how much they paid, what to say at the border, what papers to expect, how to act during questioning, and what to do after being released. It's become a formula, a blueprint for entering and remaining in the United States. One successful case often results in a chain of others, as people share the strategy with family, friends, and neighbors. That's why what once might have been a rare or extraordinary tactic has now become routine. From a policy perspective, this presents a massive problem. The system isn't just flawed, it's being navigated with precision by people who understand it better than many policymakers. Migrants may not speak fluent English, may not understand the U.S. legal system, and may not have access to a lawyer, but they have information. They have stories from others who have done it successfully. They know that if they follow certain steps, the odds are in their favor. In fact, many who are released into the U.S. never show up to their court dates, or if they do, they continue to file appeals and delay proceedings for years. During that time, they build lives, start families, find employment, and root themselves deeply into American communities. By the time the system tries to enforce a removal order, it's often too late or too politically difficult to carry out. The result is a system that punishes legal immigrants, those who go through proper channels, pay application fees, wait years for interviews, and comply with all regulations, while rewarding those who jump the line through border crossings and exploit technicalities. This has led to growing frustration, not just among conservative critics of immigration policy, but also among immigrant communities themselves who feel that they followed the rules while others are getting ahead without doing so. The fairness and integrity of the system are being undermined from within. It's not just about the mechanics of how someone enters the country. It's also about the perception of what works. In many cases, perception becomes stronger than regulation. Even if the government tries to crack down on certain practices, the belief that people can come to the U.S. and stay legally through an asylum loophole continues to spread. That belief fuels migration. It motivates desperate families to sell land, empty savings accounts, or take out loans to pay smugglers. It convinces people to take dangerous journeys with the confidence that if they just make it to the U.S. border and say the right words, they'll be allowed in. Meanwhile, U.S. border agencies and immigration courts are overwhelmed, resources are stretched thin, processing times are exploding. Immigration officers can't keep up with the volume of arrivals. The court system is backlogged with hundreds of thousands of pending asylum cases. This chaos creates even more opportunity for those who know how to game the system. And the more time it takes to resolve a case, the more time an individual has to settle into American life, making removal all the more unlikely. Lawmakers have repeatedly called this a national security issue, a humanitarian crisis, and a legal failure. They argue that it's not about being anti-immigrant. It's about having a system that makes sense, one that is secure, consistent, and fair. But as long as there is a path that allows someone to arrive illegally, get released quickly, and remain in the country with minimal risk of deportation, people will continue to take it. The rewards are too high, and the risks are too low. The worst part is that this broken system creates a cycle of dependency on political debate. Democrats and Republicans use it to argue over funding, enforcement, and compassion. Yet while they fight in Congress, the system continues to be used every day by those who understand it better than the politicians trying to fix it. That's the true failure: a government too slow to react and a public too frustrated to wait.
This refugee resettlement, Cubans, Haitians, but let me just focus on the Cuban one because I know that one well. So if you come from Cuba, you are presumed to be for fleeing political persecution. So you automatically are eligible for refugee cash, you're eligible for food stamps, you're eligible for Medicaid. Others who immigrate to this country have to wait 5 years for those and don't get the refugee cash. But within a year, depending if you're paroled, you can apply for a green card. And then you can travel back to Cuba as often as you want. Multiple times. You can take cash. You can buy stuff
Cuban
with the food
migrants
stamps.
arriving in the United States
this is not, I didn't read this in a magazine. I've seen it.
Unique
They use the food stamps, they fill up these bags, and they take it back to Cuba
that grants
over there.
them an
Or they
immediate
just
set
transfer
of
cash
benefits,
back.
rarely
Some people go back to
extended
Cuba for
to
3 months at a
other
time. They've been
groups.
here a year.
This treatment stems from historical U.S. foreign policy, particularly the assumption that most Cubans who come to the U.S. are fleeing political persecution from the communist regime in Havana. Because of this presumption, Cubans are given automatic eligibility for refugee assistance programs that provide not only a pathway to legal residency, but also financial support from day one. What many people may not realize is that this distinct treatment creates an incentive structure that is both unique and highly exploitable. Unlike other immigrants who often wait years to receive access to basic benefits, Cuban migrants are granted access to refugee cash assistance, food stamps, and federal health care programs like Medicare and Medicaid almost immediately upon arrival. These benefits, which are meant to support those fleeing genuine danger and hardship, provide a critical financial cushion and sense of stability that most asylum seekers or undocumented migrants are not afforded. On the surface, this appears to be an act of humanitarianism aligned with American values, but in practice, it raises serious questions about fairness, consistency, and system integrity. The assumption that every Cuban migrant is fleeing political persecution is no longer supported by consistent evidence. While the Cuban regime continues to be authoritarian and dissent is still punished, many recent Cuban arrivals appear to be motivated by economic opportunity rather than fear for their lives. And yet, the legal system does not distinguish between these motivations. As long as they are Cuban, they are treated under the same guidelines that were originally developed during the Cold War era. That policy, originally known as the Cuban Adjustment Act of 1966, was created at a time when the U.S. had a clear geopolitical interest in opposing Fidel Castro's government and promoting democracy in the Western Hemisphere. But more than half a century later, the world has changed, and so have the reasons people migrate. Yet the policy remains largely intact. This special treatment leads to consequences that go far beyond policy debate. It creates a sense of inequality among other immigrant communities who do not receive such benefits. Immigrants from Haiti, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and many African nations often face dire political persecution, but they are not automatically granted the same rights and privileges. They must go through lengthy asylum processes, endure waiting periods, and are often excluded from the safety nets offered to Cubans. This disparity in treatment fosters resentment and undermines trust in the immigration system as a whole. Moreover, this automatic eligibility is not just about benefits on paper, it affects real behavior. Many Cuban migrants, after receiving these benefits and securing temporary or permanent residency, are able to apply for green cards within 1 year of arrival. And once they have a green card, they are free to travel back to Cuba as often as they wish. This aspect is perhaps the most controversial and baffling to critics. If a person has fled a country due to persecution, how is it possible that within 1 year they feel safe enough to return? In many cases, these individuals travel back and forth multiple times each year. They bring goods, send cash, and visit family, all while maintaining their refugee status in the United States. This raises important questions about the legitimacy of their original claims. If Cuba is safe enough for repeated visits, does that not undermine the basis for refugee protection in the first place? It also creates a feedback loop. When others see how easily this system works, when they see that people are receiving benefits, gaining status, and traveling freely, they are encouraged to do the same. Stories circulate among Cuban communities, not only in the U.S., but across the region, about how simple and advantageous the process is. The result is a growing number of migrants who may not be fleeing persecution, but are instead looking to benefit from a uniquely generous set of rules that apply only to their nationality. The economic implications are also significant. Refugee cash, food stamps, and health care benefits are funded by U.S. taxpayers, while public assistance programs are designed to support the most vulnerable populations. There is an expectation that such support is distributed based on real need and vetted claims. When people take advantage of the system under the guise of refugee status, it not only drains public resources, but also undermines the legitimacy of the entire refugee program. It becomes harder to argue for compassion when that compassion is seen as being abused. Additionally, the policy creates a double standard in legal enforcement. Lawmakers and immigration officials are placed in a difficult position. On one hand, they must follow laws that provide preferential treatment to Cuban migrants. On the other hand, they must uphold the principle that refugee status should be reserved for those who truly fear for their lives. Balancing these two responsibilities becomes even more complicated when return visits to Cuba are not only permitted but happen frequently. In theory, returning to the country from which one has fled should be grounds for losing refugee status. In practice, this is rarely enforced. Despite efforts by some lawmakers to revise or eliminate the Cuban Adjustment Act, political willpower has been inconsistent. Cuban American communities wield significant political influence in states like Florida, where immigration policy is a deeply emotional and political issue. Any attempt to change or restrict benefits for Cuban migrants risks backlash from these communities, many of whom view the policy as a lifeline that once helped their own families. This political complexity means that the system is unlikely to change anytime soon, even though there is growing awareness of its flaws. Until reform occurs, the current policy will continue to serve as a magnet for new arrivals who understand exactly how to navigate it. And as long as returning to Cuba after just 1 year remains common and accepted, it will be difficult to argue that these individuals are truly in need of refugee protection. The special treatment afforded to Cuban migrants, once grounded in moral and geopolitical urgency, now stands as a relic of the past, one that benefits some while creating deep frustration and inequality for others. The perception of how easy it is to enter and remain in the United States is arguably one of the most powerful forces driving illegal migration today. In communities across Central America, the Caribbean, and even parts of Africa and Asia, stories circulate about people who have successfully made the journey north, crossed the border, and built lives in the U.S., often without facing any significant legal consequences. These stories spread quickly, especially with the help of modern technology. WhatsApp chats, TikTok videos, Facebook groups, and family calls carry detailed information about how to navigate the U.S. immigration system, what to say to border agents, how to apply for asylum, and how to obtain work permits once inside. And because these stories are based on real people's experiences, they hold far more weight than official government policies or legal warnings. This powerful spread of perception creates a reality of its own. When someone hears of a friend, cousin, or neighbor who successfully crossed the U.S.-Mexico border, was briefly detained, and then released into the country with instructions to report to court at a later date, that story becomes a roadmap. It offers a sense of hope and confidence. It tells would-be migrants that they too can make it if they simply follow the same path. It doesn't matter what the law says if the experience on the ground tells a different story. And unfortunately, the reality many migrants face is one in which enforcement is uneven, resources are overwhelmed, and delays in the legal system can stretch for years, giving individuals ample time to integrate and settle before their cases are even heard. This perception also diminishes the effectiveness of deterrence policies. Government efforts to promote safe, orderly, and lawful pathways to immigration often fall on deaf ears when people believe there is a faster and easier way, one that requires no waiting, no paperwork, and minimal risk of deportation. The administration might roll out new regulations, step up border security, or release stern warnings, but none of that matters if the general belief is that you can walk across the border, claim asylum, and stay. In this battle between perception and policy, perception is winning. The implications of this dynamic are significant. First, it directly contributes to the overwhelming number of migrants arriving at the southern border. Border patrol agents and immigration courts are not dealing with isolated cases. They are facing waves of people who have been told by others that the journey is worth it. Each successful crossing becomes a testimonial, convincing others to follow. These aren't just stories shared in passing. They are deliberate strategies, often involving detailed logistics, financial planning, and instructions on what to say when confronted by U.S. officials. Some migrants even rehearse their asylum claims in advance based on scripts that have worked for others. These tactics evolve as people learn more about what is effective. Second, this perception undermines the legitimacy of the legal immigration system. There are millions of people around the world waiting patiently, following the rules, submitting applications, paying fees, and enduring years, long waits for visas or green cards. For them, the news that others are entering the country illegally and receiving work permits within months is frustrating and demoralizing. It signals that honesty and patience may be punished while rule breaking is rewarded. This is a dangerous message for any legal system to send. Third, the spread of this belief system makes it incredibly difficult for U.S. authorities to manage immigration effectively. No matter how many laws are passed or how much money is spent on border enforcement, the core challenge remains psychological. If people believe the journey is worth the risk, and if they see real evidence that others have succeeded, they will continue to come. Enforcement must catch up not just with the people, but with the ideas fueling their decisions. And right now, enforcement is losing that race. The challenge is further complicated by the lack of consistent consequences. While some migrants are deported or detained, many are not. Some are granted temporary protection, others receive work permits, and many are released with court dates that may be years away. The system is simply not equipped to handle the volume of people arriving. And when people see that even those who break the rules are rarely removed from the country, it reinforces the idea that coming illegally is not only possible but practical. Additionally, politicians and media play a role in shaping this perception. Some use dramatic rhetoric about open borders or invasion to score political points, while others highlight humanitarian concerns and encourage compassion. This back and forth creates confusion. To the average person outside the U.S., it often sounds like no one is really in control of the border. That kind of messaging, especially when amplified by international media, fuels the narrative that America is open to anyone willing to take the risk. One of the most dangerous aspects of this perception is that it puts people in real danger. Smugglers exploit these beliefs to make money, promising safe passage and guaranteed success for a high price. Migrants risk everything, crossing deserts, facing criminal gangs, surviving detention centers, all because someone they know did it and made it work. The journey is brutal and sometimes deadly, but people are willing to take it because they believe the reward outweighs the risk. This cycle is incredibly hard to break. It would take a dramatic shift in both policy enforcement and public messaging to counteract years of stories and experiences that suggest coming to the U.S. without following the rules is a viable option. It's not enough to say that the laws are tough. The laws must be consistently enforced, and the outcomes must change if the perception is to shift. Until then, the belief will continue to spread, passed from one hopeful migrant to another, fueling a cycle that no amount of regulation can easily stop. And as long as this perception drives migration, the system will remain under pressure. It will continue to be exploited not just by individuals seeking better lives, but by human traffickers, drug cartels, and bad actors who understand that U.S. immigration policy can be used as a tool. This is more than just a policy problem. It's a crisis of belief, and the only way to fix it is to restore credibility, consistency, and fairness to the entire immigration process. Otherwise, the pattern will continue, and the perception will become the new reality.